It's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. A lot of Michiganders feel powerless over their own power. And you can see why. A utility like DTE or Consumers asks for a rate hike. Months later, a storm hits, the lights go out, and days pass before they're back. Then the next year, same thing. Another ask, more storms, more outages. Just this spring, DTE got 2 rate hikes approved. Now, regulators point to progress. Outage time is down about 23% since 2019. But that's with storms stripped out. And once you count them back in, one report ranked Michigan dead last in the country for how long it takes to get the lights back on. So who's watching these companies? That job falls to the Michigan Public Service Commission. 3 appointed members charged with keeping utilities safe and reliable, and your rates reasonable. My guest chairs it. Dan Scripps, welcome to the Metro.
Thanks, Robin. It's great to be with you.
And we're talking today during a heat wave. It'll hit 100 degrees in Metro Detroit, and air conditioners will be working overtime. And we know that's going to show up on the electric bill. So we're asking you, our listener, does the cost of electricity change how you use it? Are you worried about another storm that could knock power out entirely? The phone lines are open. The number is 313-577-1019. And I should mention DTE is a financial supporter of WDET. All right, Dan. I want to return to the outage that happened over the 4th of July weekend. It took about 5 days for the power to be restored, even though some in Detroit still don't have power. What is your assessment of DTE Energy's response?
Well, I think there were a lot of problems in the response in the most recent storm event. It did take a long time. It took a long time for them to get set up. I think the timing going into the 4th of July, it happened on Friday evening, July 3rd. And I think, they had been watching the storms. They had certainly been watching the weather, but ultimately they developed into something more than they were expecting, more than they were prepared for. And I think it was then exacerbated. It covered most of the Midwest. And so what they often do is rely on mutual assistance agreements where they can bring in crews from other utilities. Those utilities weren't allowing their crews to be released because they needed them closer to home. And obviously the communication wasn't where it needed to be. There were a number of problems with the restoration estimates. They were off and sometimes significantly, and just not the level of communication that you'd expect from a utility to its customers either. So just a number of things that I think, the holiday compounded them, but this is a system that needs to be available and reliable 365 days a year. We don't take holidays off. And certainly I think that fed into a lot of the frustration.
So if I'm hearing you right, some of the things you think that could have been done better have to do with preparation and communication. Are those 2 of the biggest elements at the core of this?
Yeah, I think so. Credit where it's due. I think they've done a better job in recent years. DTE actually has a meteorologist on staff that helps to prepare, and where they've been able to see weather coming, they've been able to pre-stage crews and a number of other things that has helped overall in restoration times. It's a better performing system, better performing utilities than it was just a couple of years ago. But where they get it wrong, as in this case, where the weather shows up in a way that wasn't forecast. 70-mile-an-hour winds. Your listeners know the damage that was they could see firsthand in their communities. That, I think, put them on the back foot, and particularly going into a holiday weekend, the restoration timelines just weren't what they needed to be.
You have a commission meeting coming up on Thursday. I'm wondering how many comments you've received recently about this particular storm.
We had about 1,200 comments, and we hear from people a lot, but certainly this one was off the charts. We had a lot of people who were very frustrated, deservedly so, with the level of restoration and the level of communication.
What do you do with those comments, Dan?
Well, I mean, sometimes it's people who are just trying to understand when is their service going to be restored, and we can sometimes, not always, but get that information for those folks from the company, and it certainly helps to, I think, light a fire under the utilities. Sometimes they're calling because they've got questions about things like outage credits and whether they're eligible and when that will show up, and sometimes it's just sort of a I'm frustrated. You're the people that we can call, and that's an important role too. I will say whether it's the individual comments that call in through our complaint center or the public hearings that we do, that information has helped in any number of places in terms of identifying what are strategies that we haven't thought about, and taking that directly from the people who experience the system at its worst, I think has helped to put in some of the corrective actions that have helped the system get a little better over the last couple of years.
So you're telling me that you welcome this kind of engagement, that this is helping to inform decisions that are made on the commission.
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay.
We've seen that over. I mean, this time it was a summertime storm. We've had a lot of issues with ice, as you know, back in 2023, ice storms for both consumers and DTE. More recently, it's been focused in northern Michigan. But those ice storm public hearings, and we've done a number of them after the fact, just to hear from the people who directly experience those. Those have been incredibly helpful in developing strategies for these high impact events that are in some ways difficult to predict.
You mentioned compensation as one of the things that you were hearing within those comments you've received. And I realize some people say $42 is not enough for when the power goes out. Here's Democratic State Representative Elabas Farhat discussing the possibility of raising that number.
So the MPSC, the Michigan Public Service Commission, they could say on their own, say, you know what? This $45 or $42 is unacceptable. We're mandating you do it as $100 a day.
Is he right? Can you simply vote to increase the fee DTE has to pay customers when the power goes out?
So I'd like to take it. I mean, broadly, yes. It's not quite that simple. It's a rulemaking process that takes a couple of years. But I just want to sort of highlight the difference that's been made over the last couple of years. So before 2023, customers got a one-time $25 credit that they had to apply for if they were eligible. And we did a number of things in 2023. First of all, we raised the standards. We expect more of the utilities. We increased the credit from $25 to $35. We indexed it to inflation, which is why it's $42 now. If you're out longer than a day after you're eligible, you get an additional $42 for every additional day that you're out. And we made it automatic. You don't have to try and track how long you've been out, whether you're eligible, and then apply to the utility. They need to track that for you. They've got the data. And so that automatic nature of it. And as a result, the difference between what utilities were paying out before those changes took effect was about $1 million a year. Today, it's closer to $8 million. So we literally have seen a seven-fold increase in the amount of credits being paid out to customers. Now, is it enough to cover a refrigerator of spoiled food or a night in a hotel if you need to get there? Clearly not. And I think we're trying to strike a balance with some level of accountability and a realization that the performance that the people who experience the worst performance of the system deserve to be credited back, but in a way that also preserves the ability to make the investments needed to get to a better performing grid overall. And that's really the balance that we're trying to strike. But maybe the last thing that I'll say about this is, we can fine utilities and have in any number of instances. The difference between this and those typical fines, which just go to the state treasury, is that this goes back to the people who are most affected. And I think that's a big difference. It's not just us leveling a fine, utility pays it and goes on. The dollars go directly to the people who have experienced the performance issues.
Well, I think folks can find some level of comfort hearing that. And I also appreciate you mapping out the trajectory of where we were, starting with that one-time $25 credit to where we're at now, which is $42, and that can be for multiple days. But now my question to you is, are you considering raising that compensation for folks? I mean, I realize you have a meeting this Thursday. Is this something that will be discussed? The meeting agenda isn't up online yet.
No, it's not on the agenda, and it really would take a formal rulemaking process to initiate this. So there are things that we're talking about, including extreme weather protections, that there are standards in place that when it's super hot out, like it is now, that utilities need to suspend disconnections for lack of payment. It's a public safety issue. That's one of the things that we're going to be talking about on Thursday. But in terms of the credit, again, we've seen a sevenfold increase over the last couple of years in dollars paid out. It's still not perfect, but I'll also say there's no other state in the country that provides credits at the level that Michigan does.
Huh. And again, I think that is something to note. It is something to celebrate. And then at the same time, as we know, at least one report that I cited at the top of the hour says that Michigan is ranking dead last when it comes to getting the power back on. So it sounds to me like we should be pushing for more compensation because people are in the dark for longer. Would you agree with that?
I think our focus has been on making sure they're not in the dark for as long. And
Yeah.
so you can do a lot of things with statistics. I will say that data is a little dated. And the same data, even including storms, which I know you referenced at the top. So we're best in the country in terms of reliability improvements when you take storms out. But we're actually sixth best in terms of improvement when you add storms back in. And last year is not this year, but last year, DTE for the first time in at least 25 years, and I would say it's probably much longer than that. That's just how long that we have the information, was actually in the top quarter of utilities when you consider performance across the whole year, storms included. Now, this last couple of weeks have been rough. My guess is that they're not going to repeat the performance that they had last year, and weather's a big part of that. But we are seeing improvements both when you isolate for storms and normal grid conditions, but also when you include storms. And that's been a big focus. That delta in how they respond to storms has been, in some ways, the weakest link in the chain in Michigan for a long, long time. And I will say, I think that we're seeing some improvements there.
You're really balanced about this, and I think that's good. I mean, it's helping us to think about the full picture on this, Dan. And before we move on, I want to make sure that I just have the commission's role right here. I mean, you're the one people should be able to hold responsible when the lights go out and the bill goes up in the same year. Is that a fair way to think about your job, or does it misunderstand what the commission actually controls?
No, I think that that's fair. I mean, we are the ones that authorize the rate increases. I know we'll talk about that. I know that's another source of frustration.
Yeah.
We are the ones that promulgate the reliability standards and service quality rules. So I think that that's right. I also think that going back to 1939, I mean, we've been in some form since the 1870s, but 1939 is really when the modern commission sort of was created by the legislature. And it is a balance between that accountability that's such an important part of how we do our jobs, but also the ability to take a longer term view and to have some ability to, and sometimes make unpopular decisions, candidly, because we need to be thinking 40 years into the future and what the grid needs that we increasingly rely on, and the ability to make those decisions in a way that fosters investment, even if you put every rate case up for a popular vote, I'm not sure that a lot would be approved. But at the end of the day, it's a system that we do rely on and does require investment.
I want to go to the phones for just a moment, but we have a caller, John, from the east side of Detroit. John, thanks for calling the Metro. What's on your mind?
Well, I have a question. So I live in Jefferson Chalmers, and back in the 70s, we were under urban renewal, and there was a plan to actually underground all our utilities here. And I moved in here in the 80s, but my cousins moved to West Bloomfield, and they went into a brand new subdivision that was all underground. And I'm just wondering, now that we have many, many decades behind us, what type of – do we have statistics on the additional cost of investment to put it underground? And I'm sure there are always going to be faults underground. You don't see it, but it's going to happen. And the repairs for those type of and do we have statistics on, is it a better investment to bite the bullet up front and just put it underground and then pay, extra to have repairs when it does happen, and not lose your power, not lose all your food, not, we've had a couple power outages here in Jefferson Chalmers in the wintertime, and that's really scary. So,
John, thank you so much. That is an excellent question that you're raising, and I realize that reliably this point surfaces pretty much after every storm. There are folks saying, why aren't we burying the power lines? How could that change things for us? Dan, I'm wondering how much that is a part of the conversation on the commission, or when you are interfacing with DTE folks, or if you have any data on that, if you're studying that.
We are actually. It's not surprisingly something that gets raised regularly, and for good reason. So we do look at it. We had a technical conference, I think, just in the last year on undergrounding. Have an open docket on it where we've been taking comments and digging in. And I will say it's really a case by case consideration. So I think there's clearly a case for more undergrounding, but it's also not an all or nothing thing. So trying to identify where is undergrounding the best option that delivers the most reliability benefit for the dollars invested versus things like more aggressive tree trimming or pole top maintenance and things along those lines that often can deliver some of the same benefits, not always all of the same benefits, but at a much lower cost. And then how can we better incent utilities to coordinate with local government so that when there's street repairs happening anyway and the ground's already dug up, that's something that can make that undergrounding process a whole lot less costly than if you have to go in and do it yourselves. So we've tried to say we don't want to look at whole portfolios and that we're going to underground the whole thing, but bring us specific projects and bring us a cost-benefit analysis that goes along with them. Show us that it's the right option, and I think you're going to find support for those level of investments. But maybe the last thing to say is John mentioned the sort of difference between Jefferson Chalmers and Bloomfield Hills, and I think we've got to be more aware than we've been in the past of how different communities experience the level of service from their utilities. And so one of the things that we've tried to do over the last couple of years is get reliability data, not just on the whole system, but broken down by circuits, by electrical circuits, but also census blocks and zip codes, and try and better understand the equity considerations that go into this, where some communities really are not seeing the same level of service as other communities, even though they're all paying the same cost per kilowatt hour. And that piece, I think, has been a growing focus of the commission, and one that helps to get a little more granular in terms of how different folks in different communities are experiencing the level of service from the same utility.
So what you're saying here, Dan, is before you're even able to really work in earnest towards some of these solutions, like potentially burying the power lines, as John brought up, you first have to get down to the bottom of reliability and the equity component and who is experiencing disproportionate outages and which communities are, may I ask you, experiencing it disproportionately? If I can put you on the spot, do you have that around that?
Yeah,
info?
I will say that it's been a little surprising that I think, fully assumed going in that we'd see the same sort of societal biases on the electric system that we see in so many other places. And the truth is a little more nuanced, that when you get into the data, there are communities that show up, some very urban and some very rural, that stand out as receiving particularly poor performance. But it wasn't sort of, you couldn't match it up exactly based on sort of income or ethnicity or racial characteristics as maybe simply as I assumed going in.
Before John called, we were discussing rate hikes. I think that is one that people really want to hear your thoughts on. I mean, some look at a company like DTE, which is publicly traded, and they get angry. DTE is rich. Its CEOs get paid a lot of money. I think people are wondering, why do you need to approve their request for rate hikes at all?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it's maybe a little more nuanced. So if I can take maybe one step back, and then, so when we get a rate case filed with us, we do a couple of things. The utility requests the amount of money that they think they need in addition to what they're already collecting to invest in the system. And And so the first thing is to decide or to determine what is that revenue deficiency. What is reasonable in terms of the level of investment in the system, and then how much are they likely to collect under current rates and projected usage. And so those are a couple different things. I mean, we know the current rates, but projected usage is, the multiplier of those rates that determines how much they're likely to connect. And then is there a gap? And in determining whether there's a gap, we literally go line by line through the utilities investment plan and say, this is reasonable. This might be reasonable, but it's not timely. It's, this is a project that's 2 years off or doesn't have the right corporate approval, or these are based on estimates and placeholders, and so those are not appropriate to include in rates at this time. And then some things like jet travel for corporate executives has been one in the last couple of years. We said there's just no way that's reasonable. Or incentive compensation tied to a utility's financial performance. That's great for shareholders. They should pay for it. Customers shouldn't. And so those are the things that we decide going through. But the truth is also that there are places where costs are going up. And we've seen actually the inflation in the electric sector actually outpace overall inflation over the last couple of years, that we've seen increases in transformer costs and steel and wire and other things, to the point where the most recent numbers show that annual inflation in the electric sector is about 5.9% compared to 4.2% overall. 4.2% is not great, but 5.9% is even worse. And so those are some of the things that then show up in, like, everything costs more, but what is reasonable, and then what are you likely to collect? And it's really, once you get to the end of it, we don't start and say, yes, we're going to approve it, or we're not going to approve it, or we're going to approve half of it. I think there's a sense that we sort of split the difference. It literally is a line-by-line analysis. And in the most recent DTE case, we had 768 exhibits. We had 5,500 pages of testimony, experts who were sharing their conflicting views on what was appropriate, necessary, and timely. And it was ultimately rolling all of that up that led to the number at the end of the day.
Dan, a Public Service Commission representative has said that rates are going up because fewer people are paying to maintain a grid that's built for a larger population. Is that true?
There's an element of truth to that, certainly. We have seen, it's easy in the South. I'll say that with all respect to my Southern colleagues, but when you're seeing population growth like they've seen, you get to spread the fixed costs of the system over a larger unit of sales. And so the cost for each unit goes down, and that definitely has helped. We've had the opposite challenge in Michigan over the last 20 years, where we've had pretty limited population growth, and you've got the same system, and a system that in many places is 100+ years old and needs investment, and you've just got a smaller group of sales to pay for it, and that is added to the challenge. All that said, I will say that over the last couple of years, since 2020, since the pandemic, we've actually been able to hold residential bill growth to 5% less than the overall rate of inflation. And so yes, it's gone up, but certainly not as much as other states. We've got the best bill ranking in a decade, and not even as much as overall inflation, even as electric inflation has been higher than overall inflation. So it's not a perfect story, but
Sure.
But it's one of these things where I think a disciplined approach and really going line by line has allowed us to make sure that we're approving the investments that are needed for improved reliability performance, but not improving all the bells and whistles that don't deliver value to customers but do have an impact on their bills.
Indeed, it is anything but a perfect story. And we are going to get into a little bit more of the complexity of this story. This is the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. My guest is Dan Scripps. He's the chair of the Michigan Public Service Commission. We're discussing what his commission does and the task of overseeing our utility companies like Consumers and DTE Energy. And the phone lines are open. Join the conversation, 313-577-1019. Coming up, we'll continue this discussion and talk about changes happening to our grid. Stay with us. It's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. Here in Michigan, we are stuck in a pattern. Big utility companies like DTE Energy and Consumers file for a rate hike. Months later, a storm hits, the power goes out, days go by before it's restored. And then another year goes by, another request for more money, more storms, and more outages. However slow, changes are happening to our electrical grid. And to discuss them, we're speaking with one of the people responsible for overseeing DTE and Consumers Energy. Dan Scripps is the chair of the Michigan Public Service Commission. So, Dan, as you and I have been discussing, the grid is old. How much more needs to be done to ensure that the lights are able to remain on even amid really big and dangerous storms, as briefly as you can?
Yeah, it's one of the things where, and it's not just a Michigan story. So when you look nationally, spending on the distribution system, the wires that connect to our homes and businesses, increased 47% between 2022 and 2025. And at the same time, you've got the Bank of America warning that America's grid is 30 to 46% beyond its useful life. And so those are national numbers, but obviously we're seeing that in Michigan as well, that you've got certain parts of DTE's system that go back more than 100 years. We recently commissioned a third-party independent audit into the distribution systems for both DTE and Consumers, and they came back and they found a lot of places where the systems are just older. And I think, that clearly shows up in reliability performance and shows a pattern of essentially disinvestment over the last 20 to 25 years that we're playing some catch up on.
Okay, so there are a lot of vital grid updates that need to be made. There is no question of that. And as you are noting, this is a bigger problem than just in Michigan. I'm wondering if you believe that rate hikes are the way that we should be paying for these changes.
I think so one of the beauties of the system is that it essentially has built and has been maintained for the last 100 plus years without really requiring a lot of tax revenue. It's a system that the users of the system pay for. And as a result, it's been able to be expanded and maintained because of the rates that customers pay being invested back into the system. And for DTE, just to take the example that's closest to home, their rate base just on the electric side is approximately $23 billion. And so that is just a huge amount of money that's invested into the system that then is depreciated over the useful life of those assets and paid for on a per kilowatt hour basis every time we turn on the lights. That said, there are places I think where there is opportunity for investment from the government. So one example that we saw recently is both from the state and federal government support for the return of Palisades nuclear plant to come back online. There were some pieces in terms of the relicensing process, buying new fuel, some of the upgrades that needed to happen. And it really was the federal government putting in some, the state government putting in some. And that helps ultimately, address an issue where the plant's going to be it will be great to have it back online, but that's a challenging thing to do just through rates. Similarly, DTE recently on the gas side received a $1.6 billion loan loan guarantee from the U.S. Department of Energy, projected to save hundreds of millions of dollars and offset some of the financing costs, just the financing costs of how they run their system. But those are places where getting creative and providing backstop support from the federal government or helping to defray the costs of truly innovative and groundbreaking things can really help to make sure that we have the system that we need, but at a lower cost to customers.
Dan, I realize some people are listening to this conversation and they might be saying, you all are missing the point entirely. And here's what I mean by that. Michigan has a law requiring the state to run on clean energy by 2040. But back in 2016, the legislature, with backing from DTE and Consumers, replaced net metering with a system that pays home solar owners a lot less for the extra power their panels send to the grid. And so that made rooftop solar a worse deal for homeowners. Solar, wind, nuclear, these could go a long way toward a grid that holds up in a storm. So could the commission make a rate hike conditional? Let's say tell DTE and consumers they only get the money if they restore stronger credits for home solar, or seriously ramp up how much of the state they power with solar. Because at the end of the day, we're talking about forms of energy that are not really working for us, not working for the environment, and there are other ways.
So I want to answer that in three ways, but I'll try and be very quick on each of them. So one is we've actually tried to do more with tying how utilities earn their money with the performance that their customers receive. Right now it's focused on the reliability side, but things like the duration, the time it takes to restore during storms, the time it takes to restore overall, how many customers experience multiple outages over the course of the year, how many are stuck on the worst performing circuits year after year. Those are all things that show up with our ability to penalize the utilities, or if they truly outperform, incent them, although that hasn't been the case recently, but in a way that ties their earnings to the experience their customers perform. So I think we're already doing some of that. And the next step is really to tie that to the ability of customers to better participate in things like rooftop solar and so looking at interconnection timelines and the ability to use their own resources. But I also think in things like energy waste reduction or energy efficiency, we've got some of the best programs in the country because we plan for it and we encourage it and we tie it to how the utilities earn their money. And as a result, we're saving $1.4 billion, like $2.40 for every dollar that we spend. And we've been able to avoid 2 new gas plants just from the energy we don't use. And so I think there's ways to replicate that with other distributed energy resources, whether it's flexibility in batteries or storage and storage and solar, in ways that then offset the need for these massive new capital investments that really have the effect of driving cost increases for customers.
Dan Scripps, chair of the Michigan Public Service Commission. Chair Scripps, thank you so much for joining me on the Metro.
Thanks, Robin. It's been fun.
The next public meeting for the Michigan Public Service Commission is Thursday, and DTE Energy is a financial supporter of WDET. This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. And this is the Metro. We'll be right back after the news from NPR and WDET.